combination mining tech group. If you can go to the next slide. Just the usual disclaimers, and I might jump to the next slide. As Tim mentioned, we listed about 8 weeks ago. We've been working for, I guess, more than a decade together to gather the information that we use to be able to pull together our AI machine learning technology. We're pretty tightly held. We do have a number of equity partners from our clients that have come on board with BHP Ventures, Deutsche Rohstoff, which is a German oil, gas, lithium and battery minerals company, and also our partners in DGO Gold, another ASX, I guess, gold success story that's been backing our technology and development for the last few years at both the exploration and at the parent co level. You can go to the next slide. So what we've set SensOre up to do is to really deal with some of the big issues that have been coming up in the global economy. The two themes that are driving our approach are the energy transition, the need to find more battery and critical minerals, the copper, nickel, lithium, cobalt, etc., that is sorely in demand for the energy transition from hydrocarbons away to battery, electric vehicles, etc. We also know that exploration rates for these key commodities for the Australian economy are falling. We've found a very good job of being able to find the stuff close to surface or near major mining centres at present. But undercover in complex geology and new environments, that's where the next generation of Australian mines are going to be found, and it's going to rely on deep technology, AI and machine learning to be able to enhance what geologists are doing to be able to discover those new deposits. We're also riding a trend, I guess, with the recent geopolitical issues globally about onshoring of rare earth critical mineral components. The domestic markets for North America, Europe and Australia, they understand that they've been purchasing a lot of these commodities from more challenging jurisdictions, and disruptions to supply recently, particularly with Ukraine and Russia, mean that we need to find more of these things close to home. And there's been significant, I guess, announcements by the US and by the Australian governments to support battery critical mineral onshoring in both countries. If we can go to the next slide. Well, I mentioned a bit before that we combine mining technology and exploration. It means that we work with others, we generate our own income from our services and the technology that we apply. We also get some unique insights into those new exploration areas that are available, and we peg those ourselves and work with other parties to be able to unlock that value. So we have two streams of revenue associated with that, and it provides us a unique opportunity to give people who invest in mining technology exposure to that exponential upside that can come from a major exploration discovery for one of these key commodities. Next slide. So I just wanted to delve this time in this presentation a bit more into the technology, a bit deeper. Our approach is to leverage recent advances, cutting edge technology that have come through from machine learning and artificial intelligence. And this is pattern recognition largely. It's about finding and developing a global data set of what it takes to make a major mine or be able to find a major deposit. And that means analysing tens of thousands of deposits for gold, copper, nickel, lithium, etc. Understanding what they look like at depth in different locations at different ages, etc. So really unpacking what the fingerprint is of a major discovery, and understanding all the types of information, all of the key indicators that can lead us to knowing not only that there's an exciting piece of terrain there, but that it's going to become a major, potentially billion-dollar value creator for those companies. And we used data sets from geology, geophysics, and geochemistry. These are the main ingredients that lead to the discovery within those areas. But we do some pretty novel things with it. I mean, we use the advances that have come through from a computer being able to learn to read and be able to understand images, etc., to train it to be a geologist. We get them to read reports, to be able to ingest information from maps and turn those into quantitative layers and be able to see how those observations, that the distilled knowledge of 100 years of geology can be used quantitatively within the algorithm to be able to see the patterns that lead to a deposit. We also utilize aspects of machine learning to be able to infill missing data. Geochemical information, surface sampling and drilling is very sparse in many areas, but you need to be able to use the prediction, the ability to anticipate and fill in data that's missing from different areas of the machine learning advances in those areas. And so once we've built up the full fingerprint using some of these novel techniques, then we go into our search space, which is our data cube. And if we can go to the next slide. The data cube is basically a digital twin of the Australian continent, divided up on 400 by 400 metre cells and populated with over 2,500 layers of information. That's all the variables that come out of geology, geophysics and geochemistry. And we use the information we have to infill missing information to be able to build up the first time total data set predictions across the continent for that information. Just in WA alone, 8.5 million surface samples, 280 million dual assay intervals. This is on a scale that's never been attempted before to be able to pull together this information. Some of these data sets are available in public repositories, but unlocking them, cleaning them, ingesting them has been beyond the realms of any company, even the majors, until recently. You want to go to the next slide? So together with these, we pull together our product suite. We have companies that pay us to be able to put add their information into the data cube, be able to look at it and be able to interact with that information, to be able to run some of the new machine learning tools, not only to enhance their own exploration, but be able to target and get a greater understanding of that information. So that gives us a good revenue profile going forward. And if we can go to the next slide. And be able to pull that together and use it predictively in our suite of prospectivity maps. And so this is a new way of being able to examine everyone's tenements, be able to understand for investors like yourselves what the prospects are for companies you've invested in, being able to access that information, see where the drill programs are being planned, and be able to understand the information and geology that's being able to drive to those locations. So we've had interest from clients outside of the exploration space to be able to inform the decision making around investments and the prospectivity of the companies in which they're invested in. We're just going through a new release at the moment, incorporating all of the geology and geophysics available in WA and the extension of that to South Australia for gold and copper exploration. Next slide. So after pulling together the training data set, the understanding of what the digital fingerprints are of known deposits, and creating our digital search space, we can use that, as I've talked about last couple of slides, to work with others to generate revenue for ourselves. But sometimes we see within those wonderful images that we pull up, the new areas deep undercover that people haven't been able to target in before, we see these diamonds, these gems of targets, and we acquire them ourselves. And here we're just looking at some of the nickel targets that we've been able to bring under the SensOre banner. The Aurelia project is a flagship project of ours, which we're farming into a Chalice joint venture with SensOre owning 70% of that stake. It's a very large geophysical nickel predicted anomaly, but Chalice is obviously focused on the Julimar trend, but our system loves this deep targets out in the Nullarbor, particularly our Munera, Jenkins and Scorpion targets, which are exciting base metal plays and that fall out of the artificial intelligence that we've used to identify these targets. Next slide. We can do the same for lithium. We're doing that with Deutsche Rohstoff, which is a company that is building downstream processing capacity in Germany for lithium processing. They're seeking feed from key markets like Western Australia. We've been able to process and be able to impute the geochem for lithium right across southern WA and recently incorporating the Pilbara and the northern regions to open up new areas of lithium potential that we've been able to peg and acquire. Next slide. all this information we're pulling together and working to create a SaaS-based platform for customers and for ourselves. This means that instead of working with dozens of clients that we do at the moment, we can expand that to hundreds and potentially thousands of clients here in Australia and overseas. Working with CGI, which is a global tech leader, to be able to develop our commercial readiness and platform components that mean we can remove some of the human elements that are still involved within the process and process that information quicker and faster than we've ever been able to do before. Next slide. A couple of the benefits that we're able to pull together from this approach. We do have a significant ESG benefit for the sector. One of the results is more strategic drilling, more surgical drilling, less holes in the ground for better results. It means we can reduce the amount of hydrocarbons that are used in exploration, drilling, etc., and that potential. Disturbing less land. Land access is becoming more challenging with native title and other aspects there. So we want to make sure that we can reduce our footprint as much as we can as an industry. And of course, the products that we're working on are the tech metals of the future that we're looking to receive and sustain. I will just go to one more slide. I might have to skip through a couple here because I'm running out of time. We do have an extensive portfolio of gold that we've been developing with DGO and ourselves. We've got drilling programs underway continually at present, picking up 6 of our targets in a really aggressive 2022 program. We've got great gold hits at some of our projects. And if we go to the next slide, talking about here, we're just south of Eagle Hawk target is just south of the Mulga Bill discovery. The Great Boulder Resources has been working on. Our system loves the extension of that trend to the south. It also loves the Mulga Bill project itself. We're drilling that at present. Next slide. And next slide. So just finally, Tim's in the background there. We've got a really unique business model that combines technology and exploration and development opportunities. You get exposure not only to our tech side, but also to our portfolio of nickel, copper, lithium, and gold targets. We work with the majors. We work with small companies as well. BHP is a big supporter. Our SaaS platform is under development and we're expanding globally. So look forward to being able to talk to you in the future and being able to demonstrate how we are transforming and disrupting mineral exploration in Australia and globally. Thanks, Tim.
Thanks, Richard. Really interesting business model. There's a question here first up, which is probably critical to the whole business model, is what's the source of the data?
Yeah. Many sources. I guess in Australia, we are blessed with really large public data sets, the companies reporting that information to the government. It is almost unusable in that format. If you imagine 70,000 different company submissions in different formats going into WA, you need to develop computing capacity to remove the human element to be able to ingest all that information, and we've done that. So we use that information, we get client information, we can crawl information from ASX listings, ASX postings, etc., and be able to ingest that information within the system. We're growing that proprietary data layers all the time. We use bespoke data layers that we can offer within that system. So it is a learning approach. The more we can add, the more it benefits. And we know now that in the next generation and the next runs, the AI will learn, improve, and do better and better, as it has in every other industry it's disrupted.
And just with that data collection and the AI technology, does it, will it work in overseas jurisdictions, Indonesia, Africa? Can you work with hydrocarbons, for example?
Yeah, it is agnostic as to commodities. So you can train it on, we have 74 different elements and metals from the process within our geochem layers, and obviously geology and geophysics can be trained on any of those commodities. It does work. I guess initially it works closer where you've got good data sets. So it will have the most advantages in Australia, Canada, parts of Scandinavia. And really it's about refreshing the exploration potential of known mining jurisdictions when you're stepping from the near mine environment into undercover or more complex geology in those regions. And really there's a lot more to be discovered inside of the head frame of the mine. That's the best place to go looking, rather than taking something that is completely left field, away from infrastructure and elsewhere. So we won't be going to West Africa. We won't be going to parts of Asia just yet. And there's a hell of a lot to keep us busy with just in our own backyard in WA.
And so you've kind of got a dual model here where you find some data that's very exciting, for want of a better word, then you essentially take a proprietary position in that mine. And is the plan to JV that sort of asset and keep that on the books and then look for the next?
Yeah, the scale of upside from discovery is huge. And the investment that we put into our data is equivalent to what other mining companies just put into drilling. So it's not cheap, it's not easy. There are a lot of barriers to other people doing that. We want to be remunerated with equity, royalties, etc., for the investments that we put in place. And that's why we'll look to work with other companies. Those nickel targets, these are big geophysical anomalies. They're going to be, priorities for mid-tier and major companies to partner with. And we're excited about the people who are keen to work with us on nickel and copper targeting. Gold, we like gold. Gold's what the system was developed for. We'll focus our exploration efforts within gold and the commodities that we're targeting. We've got good gold intercepts on 3 of our projects already.
And just quickly, in terms of the subscription model for mining companies listed in Australia, what's the sales process look like, and how does that work from a subscription perspective?
Yeah, data is key. Data is what we do. With the platform we're about to release with CGI and Unico, and at providing them access to all of the information, not only the stuff that we've cleaned and ingested, but also the approaches we've used to impute that missing data and give us unique views of the continent. That'll be a subscription model where companies will be able to access that, be able to manipulate their own data, utilize our algorithms to be able to clean and uplift any data that they choose to add to the system, and give some pretty unique visualizations that I hope investors will be seeing released on the ASX platform in coming years, which provide much more insight and granularity than some of the images you see in the gravity and magnetics that are popular with companies today.
Great, Richard. That's all we have time for. Really interesting story. There's a lot more questions. If you have time, you can answer those online, but we'll follow up again. I think it's a really interesting story.
Thanks, Tim. A pleasure.
Thanks, Richard. Next up, we welcome back Magnus Energy Technologies, ASX code MNS, market cap of around $54 million and a one-year return of up 33%. Magnus aims to become a global producer of next generation green credentialed lithium ion battery. We have with us the Executive Chairman, Frank Poullas. Frank, over to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Tim, and thanks for to Share Cafe for the opportunity to present here today. Magnus is quite a unique story. While it's in the battery space, it's one of these unique plays that is vertically integrated, where we're involved in from the mine all the way down to the production of the lithium-ion batteries itself. I might skip down to slide 3, if that's okay. Just a disclaimer there. So yeah, that's the vision, to be that global vertically integrated play. And throughout the presentation, we'll go through that in more detail with each of the projects and our involvement in all the aspects of that. Next slide, please. There's 3 main projects or 3 main verticals around battery manufacturing, where the main project and that we have is the IM3 New York lithium-ion battery plant, which most will probably be familiar with. We also own just below 10% of C4V, which is a lithium-ion battery technology company. And then we have our mine in Tanzania, which is 100% owned by Magnus, and that's a graphite project that is nearing sort of first stage development works. Next slide, please. One of the markets that we see as being really important is the US market when it comes to lithium-ion batteries. It's probably one that's sort of lagged behind both Asia and the European markets in the amount of plants that are coming online and that are online at the moment, which has sort of worked really well for us and has been a huge opportunity for us. And we're in close to being in production. So we're at final stages of finalizing production at our New York battery plant in Endicott. As I'm sure most are familiar with, there's a lot of government funding that is being provided to groups who are in either cell manufacturing that is producing the batteries, or even the raw material plays or groups who are involved in the supply chain of lithium-ion batteries by the US government. And it's, I believe we're sort of in the right place at the right time with our project. And we're also looking at taking advantage of some other opportunities that are involved in the supply chain of lithium-ion batteries as well from a Magnus point of view. So we're evaluating a number of things as we go forward. Next slide, please. So New York battery plant. First and foremost, one of our key projects. We are the largest shareholder in the project. Between ourselves and C4V, the technology play, we pretty much own the majority of that project. We will be producing some of the greenest batteries out there. That was done by a study that was commissioned by NYSERDA, which is New York State Energy Research and Development Authority. They commissioned ABT Associates, a large consulting group in the US, to look at the whole life cycle analysis of the production of our batteries, which literally came out to say that we will be producing the greenest batteries globally. We say some of it because there's always new projects coming online. It is a supply chain that has no Chinese influence, which sort of also sets us apart from a lot of our peers out there. And in the US, we see, as we mentioned, there's a lot of growth in the area. There's a lot of funding coming into the area, and being able to establish ourselves and start our production in the coming months is something that we think will, set ourselves for the future. Over the page, please. So there's been a number of stages of production, starting with our manual production, which is completed, the semi-automated production or process that has been commenced. And towards the end of the first half this year, we plan to be in production at that fully automated scale. We've got an experienced team, Ramboll, large Danish engineering group. There's been the main engineering contractor for the project. 95% of the energy will be powered by clean energy, and just a couple of sort of minor figures, like we will be aiming to produce 50 cells every 5 minutes. The plan is to scale up to 38 gigawatt hours. So we're starting with a capacity of 1.8 gigawatt hours, and the plan is to go up to 38 gigawatt hours and to grow that exponentially very quickly. Next slide talks about the financing that we recently completed, which was $100 million of financing, and it was intellectual property-based financing. So the financing was around the IP. So there's a couple of interesting aspects there. One confirms what we have been talking about in our technology, and not only the uniqueness of our lithium-ion battery sort of cathode chemistry, but also some of the great advantages it possesses in the marketplace today. But secondly, it allows us to have this financing at some greater terms as well. Next slide, we talk about that technology, and we touch on C4V's technology around speed of charging, the lifespan costs, and safety, and we'll get into greater detail in the next couple of slides. Next slide talks about battery technology. So we mentioned about ABT Associates and the green batteries. We're also associated or a part of a program with US CAR. So the US CAR program is a program where we're providing cells where those cells are using virgin raw materials and recycled raw materials. The recycled raw materials is a collaboration with American Battery Technology company, and their technologies around recycling. But this whole program is with US CAR, which is made up of General Motors, Ford, and Stellantis in the US. Next slide goes into greater detail around our cathode chemistry that we touched on before. So our chemistry does not have any cobalt or nickel in the chemistry, and is mainly a lithium phosphate cathode technology, and there's some mixed metals in that. Now, as you can see, the comparison to other technologies there, while we don't have the energy of NMC or NCA, sort of about 10% below those, we have greater voltage and the capacity that's very close. But the huge advantages here is around safety, where our batteries are safe, like say an LFP battery, but we have greater capacity and greater cell energy than the LFP battery, but at similar costs. And as probably the audience is aware, you look at groups like Tesla, they are now producing LFP batteries as well. Where there was previously a misconception that LFP wouldn't work or wouldn't be suitable for the auto industry, well, they're moving towards LFP. And we've got something that from a cell energy and a capacity point of view is superior to LFP, but at the same cost. Next slide, we touch on fast charging. So we've put out a number of announcements over the last 12 months or so around fast charging. The most recent program or results have been about 20-minute charge and 20-minute discharge, where we've had results over 1,000 cycles, and we've had a retention rate of over 93%. So this is something we see as being imperative and a potential game changer in the marketplace. For those who've got electric vehicles, charging is the main pain point. So this is something that's very exciting for us going forward. Lastly, over the slide, we start touching on our graphite mine and our anode materials. Something that's really unique with what we have is the fact that we're able to produce a battery grade anode material via mechanical processes only. So we don't need any thermal or chemical or any acids in purifying that product. And what that translates to is a very green product. And secondly, from a cost point of view, should be the cheapest product in the marketplace as well. Next slide talks about traditional processes when it comes to producing anode products versus our process. As you can see, apart from the sort of less steps, we've got some key advantages around high yields of our graphite and sort of the green attributes that come to it. And that all starts because of the initial product that we have in the ground with our graphite, which we produce a greater than 99% concentrate just via basic flotation. Next slide talks about our pilot equipment that we have in the US. So we've had a pilot plan doing a lot of the spheronization downstream processing of our graphite, and that's been going on for over 6 years. And we're looking at capitalizing on that in the coming future. Next slide talks about our ESG attributes around our graphite project. So high purity, there's no chemical or thermal purification. There's great aspects around employment in Tanzania. And we're currently working and have been from day one working very closely with the community. There's a resettlement program that we're doing under UN guidelines and so on. And we have a special economic zone also, which is a unique license that we're the only mining group in Tanzania to have. Next slide talks about the corporate social responsibility. We've been involved in a number of programs to assist the local community in Tanzania, from building schools to classrooms to medical facilities. And the final slide talks about why Magnus energy technologies. Well, that regulatory tailwind this is just very early stage with our battery production, which is going to scale up immensely, exponentially, very quickly. We have a highly experienced, incredible board. We believe we have world-class IP, the high-quality graphite, and recently we've signed some offtakes, not only on the battery side, but also with our graphite. So thank you, everyone, for your time and listening to our presentation. If there's any questions, happy to answer them.
Thanks, Frank. Lots of questions, always lots of questions for you. And I suggest that shareholders probably take some time to look further through your presentation. But first up, while fully automated production is due this quarter, overall completion is at 63%. Does this mean that completion will be 100% this quarter?
That's a really good question, and I'm glad that's been brought up. So we're working on our next update, just to answer another of the questions that I've seen that's popped up. But when we talk about 100% completion, a lot of that includes sort of some cosmetic items, like the painting of the building and a few sort of things around certain offices internally and so on. So once we're at fully automated production, to answer the question, we won't be at 100%. So the main sort of and the most important thing is hitting that production, rather than some of the other sort of external works that contribute to being at 100%. In providing that next update, we'll make sure we answer that question in greater detail, and at what sort of percentage rate we will be at when we are at that fully automated production. But at the moment, we are on track for fully automated production, and no, it won't be at 100% at that point. But that's not sort of being at 100% isn't the key thing here. It's starting that production and then working towards revenues in the third quarter.
And Frank, obviously the US government's had a very large grant program, which has allocated about $6 billion in this space. And more of that should be available for the distribution from June. Do you consider the project is in a good position to receive a potential grant?
Personally, yes. And in regards to the $6 billion you mentioned, where there's about $3 billion for cell manufacturing and then for supply chain partners and battery materials, we have applied in there, and we are in a short list as well. So we're quietly confident that we will be able to access government grants and government funding for our scale up.
And is that sort of grant the kind of what will enable you to accelerate to kind of 38 gigawatts per hour?
So both the grant will assist, but some of the sort of larger funding that we're working towards will assist. And yeah, that is a large part of the plan. But there's a number of conversations going on at the moment, not only from governments, but also from strategics, from groups who have been in the energy space but looking at getting into the battery space. So we're looking at a number of funding avenues, from public to sort of private money and strategic money as well.
And just, can you give us a little bit more of an update on Nachu in terms of its how it's tracking for its delivery of its BFS?
So the BFS is on track for later this quarter as well. We've been speaking to a number of groups. There's obviously a lot of interest around graphite, and especially on the downstream anode materials. Obviously, we're involved in a number of discussions, not only on the battery side, but from the graphite side as well. And it seems that right now there's like, apart from sort of lithium, we all know, what has happened there with lithium prices, but sort of seems like there's a bottleneck around nickel and anode materials. While there's, a lot of graphite in the world, there's a shortage of anode materials, and with a lot of our discussions that that are taking place, a number of groups are looking at, securing supply in the future for these anode materials, being these OEMs, but they're looking at non-China supply as well, and diversifying their supply, because currently the majority comes from China. So it's really exciting, but on the going back on the Matthews side, BFS, we've kicked off a few sort of basic infrastructure pieces for production. We're looking forward to sort of trying to secure that funding for the mine later towards the end of the year, which will get us on track for production in the second half of 2024.
Thanks, Frank. That's all we have time for, but there's a lot more questions online. If you've got time to answer them, that'd be appreciated. If not, I'll shoot those questions through to you next week.
Thanks, Tim. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thanks, Frank. Next up, we welcome back Elementos, ASX code ELT, market cap of around $150 million these days. It's had a 1-year return of up around 150%. The company is a diversified tin production and exploration company with assets in mining-rich jurisdictions, including Spain and Australia. We welcome back CEO, Joe David. Joe, over to you. Thanks, mate.
Thanks, Tim, and thank you to Share Cafe for having me on again. We just jump straight to slide 3, please. So for those that I feel like, as much as I always talk about Elementos, it's always good to talk about tin. It is not a metal that's super well understood. I think tin foil and tin cans are still the first thing that comes to mind for most people. But what tin, its major use is now, is electrical solder. Solder is the glue that holds together all electrical components. And clearly, as we move into a green infrastructure and EV world, there's more circuits in absolutely everything. This is a bit of a study, this slide here, done by MIT University and Rio Tinto, presented a few years ago, which basically showed tin was going to be the most sensitive and the most impacted by our move to these green technologies. And certainly that is what has been supported or shown in the recent movement in the tin price. I think what surprises a lot of people is the fact that it would outrank or be more sensitive than many other metals that people would consider technology or battery metals. One of the reasons for that is tin is such a small market. It is described as the spice metal casually, which effectively just shows, like salt and pepper in a menu. Salt and pepper is probably in every single dish on the menu. Tin is in nearly every single electrical component, even if it is not mentioned in the quantities of some of those other components. So next slide, please. Obviously, this increased demand has driven the share price to the tin price to all-time highs. The London Metals Exchange price went over 50,000. We've fallen back to a nice stable level, about 43,000, 44,000 at the moment. And that is purely from this demand that is growing very strongly, and the fact that supply is dropping off and struggling to be maintained even at current levels. So the other thing I'll just point out, this is a London price. Obviously, it also trades in Shanghai, and it trades about $10,000 higher than what's shown here. So certainly a lot of strength in the tin price from what it was a couple of years ago. Next slide, please. Just on the drop-off of supply, the major suppliers are listed here on the left: China, Indonesia, South America, Myanmar. Not much security supply for global off-takers there, certainly looking for additional supply. And then on the right here, there's a slide that shows quite clearly that those traditional major producers are struggling to maintain their current output and certainly are dropping off in many instances. So next slide, please. So what that drives us to is this slide here. This is data from the International Tin Association, which shows by about 2025, we're going to have a 50 to 70,000 tonne deficit in the market. That includes projects like ourselves coming on and other junior and mid-cap miners who are trying to get their projects up. Even with those projects coming up, the International Tin Association is predicting a significant gap of 50 to 7,000 tonnes. and that is on a market size of about 360 to 370,000 tonnes. So very significant. The International Cement Association upgraded their traditional long-term growth rate from 1.8% recently to 3 to 4%. That is their conservative number. They also think that has opportunity to grow even higher, creating even larger deficits. So it's a market under stress, like many of the metals right now, and certainly going to play a role to fill that gap. Next slide, please. So our major asset that we're completely focused on right now is the Oropesa tin project. It is in the south of Spain. It's in the province of Andalusia. Andalusia is where you want a project in Spain. There's major miners operating there, and over 50% of Spain's mineral revenue comes out of there. They're very supportive of miners and very supportive of major projects, including open cut mining projects, unlike other places in Europe. Some of our neighbours, Sandfire just bought in recently to the Matsa mining complex, which is 60 k's from us. The first Quantum's mining there, also the Rio Tinto copper mines being mined since Roman times. So big open cut mines in the region, a lot of support. So flick to the next slide, please. We picked up this asset in 2020. Since then, we have done a major drilling campaign. November last year, we announced a significant increase to our mineral resource, which is 50% increase, leaving us with just under 19 million tonnes of resource at 0.4% tin, which is a very handy resource for our open pit mine. And we identified a lot of mineralisation close to surface. Next slide, please. So that led us to doing an optimization study, which really rescoped the throughput of the project. We're now, and we just released these results to the market a couple of weeks ago. We're now planning a 1.25 million tonne mining rate. That puts about 1 million tonnes through the front of the plant, and that produces about 3,350 tonnes per annum of tin metal to enter the market. Next slide, please. So some pretty handy NPVs here. Our current market cap's about $150 million. We have a couple of assets. Certainly, this is the major asset of the company. Using pretty conservative tin price assumptions, you probably remember the current price we're looking at is about $44,000 in London right now and $54,000 in China. Re-ran the basis of our study at $32,000. Just to make sure we will be financially viable through all parts of the commodity cycle, even if we believe the tin price is going to stay significantly higher. And we've got some pretty nice NPVs there, even using conservative numbers. Obviously, if you start using anything close to spot, we have a very, very good-looking project there. So if you flick on to the next slide. We also very pleased to announce at the start of March, we got named in the Andalusian government, which is the province we're in their state significant project, or as they call it, their project accelerator group. It's a very high profile group to be part of. Most of the other miners in there, Sandfire and the Rio Tinto guys, they all have billion-dollar companies and billion-dollar projects. So for us to be named there as a small junior Australian miner, certainly shows a great deal of support from the government. And subsequent to that, in early April, we also just submitted our mining license application and our environmental impact assessment study. So certainly great timing for us to get this big tick of government support just as we go into our assessment period. Next slide, please. So from moving forward from now, we do go into our definitive feasibility study. We're well progressed with a lot of our technical disciplines, which have already been maturing on site, got all our geotech drilling done. We're finishing off some pilot plant test work right now to confirm our flow sheet, although it's already very mature, as well as dewatering studies and the rest of it, just kicking off tailings dam design and a number of programs of work like that. So well advanced in that, but we're really going to be starting to kick off our detailed mine planning exercise and should soon be engaging with some EPC lump sum type process plant contractors, which make up a majority of our 2/3 of the capex of this project, with the goal of having all those studies done and the approvals back during 2023, hopefully in the first half, and then moving into 2024, moving the project into construction and then further into operations. Next slide, please. We are a multi-asset company, though, as I said. So while our majority of focus is on our Oropesa project, we do have our Cleveland project in Tasmania, which is a very interesting project in its own right. it was an operating tin mine till 1986 when the tin price pretty much went to nothing overnight when the Malaysian cartel went into liquidation. It's got a 7.5 million tonne resource there. It's also got a very interesting tungsten resource. It's just been tagged at about 250 metres worth of depth, so something we're quite interested in. Next slide, please. As well as being in a very known tin province, and I guess metals province in northwest Tasmania, we are looking to expand this mineral resource. We actually have the drill rig spinning right now on site. We're onto our 3rd out of 5 holes, drilling targets not only within and surrounding the current resource, but we have 4 drill holes in the purple zone shown here, drilling along strike. So for us, identifying that extra mineralisation and then obviously moving into a resource phase and then into mine planning and studies, certainly a focus for us. A couple of years behind the development of our Spanish project, but certainly something that's very exciting to us as well. Next slide, please. So for a corporate point of view, Tim covered this briefly, $150 million market cap. With our last announced cash position was 3.9 million. We have significantly more cash in the bank than that, which I look forward to announcing in our quarterly, following a number of options which have been converted. So yeah, well funded through the end of the DFS. Our shareholder base there is also shown. Our major shareholder is our non-executive chairman, Andy Gregg. And if you move on to the next slide, I've just got a brief summary. Andy's a big supporter of the company, as I said, our 12.5% shareholder. He ran Bechtel's Metals and Mining division for 13 years. And for those who know, Bechtel's US's biggest engineering construction firm. As well as that, we have Brett Smith, who's currently the executive director of Metals X, has certainly got some good tin knowledge on our board. He's on as a NED. We also have Calvin Tracy and Cory Nolan. I will not speak up, give you Cory's bio because he is presenting after me for Platina Resources, but certainly got a very experienced board there and very focused on moving this into production. Next slide. I think we're probably done. All right, Tim, I'm happy to finish there.
Thanks, Joe. Always good to hear from you.
Yeah.
Just in regards to the tin price, we've seen, lithium and nickel go through the roof, and obviously it had a very strong tin price as well. Do you think the current tin price reflects how much tin goes into an EV?
EV is certainly one of the uses. So an EV car has about 8 times as much tin in it than a standard vehicle. So that's significant. But there's a number of other technologies all associated with green infrastructure. One of the major growths that the International Tin Association is tracking is solar wire. So that is a wire that connects all the solar modules within a panel. It's a copper wire, flat copper wire surrounded by tin. And that has actually increased China's demand on tin by about 20% in the last couple of years. So a huge growing market. They think they'll add 75 tons of tin for every gigawatt hour of solar panels produced moving forward. So there's some huge demand increases coming, and we see the demand side growing very strongly.
Yeah, it seems like the market's playing catch up here in regards to tin compared to, say, lithium and nickel. In that regard, though, lithium projects have kind of seen some government funding, and then you've kind of got the critical minerals equation, which is supported by or government funding. Where does tin sit in relation to Elementos potentially being able to get access to government funding?
Yes, unfortunately, tin doesn't sit on the Australian government's critical minerals list. We're not exactly sure why. All the fundamentals should have it on that list, but it is on the US government's critical minerals list, has been for many, many years. So we certainly see the US investing strongly offshore. There's no known tin mines or tin production in North America or any that are actually operating or in development. So certainly their investment, as we know, the US is looking to invest offshore. So certainly, everything from the relationships between the Australian government and the US is also able to invest in any country that has a military agreement with, and that does include Spain. So not only the US, the EU, as you know, is really trying to secure its raw material supply. There's a lot of good policy coming out of the EU right now, and we're working as closely as we possibly can with the EU government to try to get some of that support through to our Oropesa project in Spain.
And that was the next question, kind of how do you plan to fund the transition from being an explorer to becoming a producer?
Yeah, hey, we're well funded through the end of the study. Obviously, at the end of the study, we moved pretty clearly into project financing. We're not looking to stress this project in any great way. We will be looking to do traditional project finance facilities, 50 to 60% gearing. That's really the levels we're looking with. We're really trying to keep this a European story, though. We're certainly wanting to talk to European banks as much as we can, get European offtakes. There's just such a demand right now to keep that raw material supply in Europe. That is our number one focus. But certainly, Europe and the US and to some extent other countries have a lot of agreements between them. So Europe's our number one focus for the Ore Appraiser project for sure.
Makes sense, Joe. That's all we have time for. Obviously, you've had a very successful 12 months, and we'll get you back on in the near future.
Thanks, Tim. Appreciate it. Thanks for the time.
Okay, thank you. Next up, finally, we have Platina Resources, ASX code PGM, market cap around $23 million, 1 year return of minus 21%. The company is gold-focused explorer targeting world-class provinces in Western Australia. We welcome back Cory Nolan, who is the managing director. Cory, over to you. Thanks, mate.
Good afternoon, Tim and ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for the opportunity to come and give an update on our progress. We're just on the cusp of being able to drill 2 of our projects in Western Australia. So we're expecting an exciting period in the next 6 months. Next slide, please. So Platina's developing 3 gold projects in Western Australia. We own 100% of each of those projects. And as I mentioned, we're on the cusp of being able to drill 2 of those, hopefully in the next few months. We're 23 million market cap. And we also have a scandium project in New South Wales. We believe it's one of the world's highest grade scandium projects. We've got an investment of over $16 million in that project. And we're looking at a number of opportunities on how we can unlock that value for shareholders. Next slide, please. Platina also has a portfolio of investments. That investment portfolios worth just under $8 million at the moment. Our plan is to liquidate that investment portfolio over time and use those funds to fund our exploration activities in Western Australia and maintain our tight capital structure. Each of these investments is really interesting in their own right. A number of these companies are currently drilling, and we're obviously hopeful of them delivering good results. Major Precious Metals, which is our largest investment in this portfolio, completed an 8,500 meter drilling program on the Scania project in Greenland late last year, and we believe that they're getting very close to announcing those results. And off the back of those results, we'll probably see a fairly significant increase in what is already one of the world's largest palladium and gold projects. Next slide, please. So value in Platina will come from exploration upside in our 100% owned gold projects, really realizing value from our investments, which we can put back into our exploration program, and optimizing and realizing value, unlocking value from our scandium project in New South Wales. Next slide, please. So our key focus is West Australian gold exploration. We obviously like Western Australia. It's a world-class gold province, very high discovery potential, streamlined permitting processes. We've got the 2 projects, Charla and Mount Naira, in the Yilgarn and Creighton, obviously well known for its all of its world-class projects. And we have the Xanadu project, which is kind of nestled between the Yilgarn and the Pilbara Creightons, probably less known by many investors, but it has a number of world-class deposits and is relatively unexplored compared to those other 2 basins. So it's a really interesting area. Next slide, please. We recently hired an exploration manager to run our programs in Western Australia. Rowan comes across from De Grey Mining. He's got nearly 15 years experience and has been extensively involved in the last 3.5-4 years on the discovery of the multi-million ounce Hemi deposit. So he's got excellent credentials, and we look forward to Rowan not only contributing to our existing projects, but helping identify other M&A opportunities to help grow our portfolio. Next slide, please. So we've got two core projects, Xanadu. It's a large package of tenements, just over 500 square kilometres. We're 38 kilometres south of Paraburdoo. We've got very good infrastructure, and that infrastructure will allow us to keep our exploration costs low. The primary focus of our exploration activities is in the northwestern end, where there has been quite a lot of historical drilling. We're only 7 kilometres away from the Mount Olympus deposit. It's 1.65 million ounces in resources today. It's historically had 350,000 ounces produced, and it's a very exciting area. And we're bringing a modern and systematic exploration approach to advancing our Xanadu project. Next slide, please. So we really like Xanadu. As I mentioned, it's had a little bit of historical drilling in it before, but the focus of a lot of the exploration activities was on the development of some oxide resources for a small heap leach operation that was built. But some of that drilling that we have within our project has some very good economic grade and width intersections, and the project's never really been followed up with a systematic exploration program. It's a really attractive geological setting. It's on the Nangilgardi fault zone. It's got a 2 million ounce ore body nearby. There's plenty of gold in historical drilling. We've got favorable rocks there, so we really think that we've got the right location here for drilling. Next slide, please. So this slide just shows you some of the historical gold intersections, and we recently completed a significant geophysics program over this 10-kilometre section of that structure, and it's highlighted a number of deeper targets that we want to follow up with some drilling. So on the next slide. So our overall approach at Xanadu is one, we'll do some shallower drilling. The depth of oxidation here is around 80 meters. So we think there is the potential to build up some oxide resources here. But there's also the potential for much deeper mineralization within a very large zone of alteration here. So now that we've completed the geophysics, we're just working on getting our cultural heritage clearance so that we can immediately start drilling, and we'll be looking to do an initial program of around 4,000 meters to test this target. Next slide, please. A second wholly owned project is our Challa project. It's 2 exploration licenses covering nearly 300 square kilometres, nestled between Mount Magnet, Sandstone, and UME, prolific gold producing region in Western Australia. Our tenements don't have a lot of historical exploration on them. They're covered in quite shallow outcrops, so there's not a lot of surface expression across the tenement package. So we've been relying on a fairly systematic program of soil sampling. We've done nearly 4,000 soil samples now, and combining that information with geophysics, and we're now at the point where once we get our cultural heritage clearance done here, we'll do a RAB air core program looking to sort of drill down to bedrock and target anomalies within that bedrock layer so that we can identify further targets for deeper drilling. Next slide, please. So one of the key attractions of the Challa project is that our western tenement is it's on greenstone, and it traverses the Challa fault zone, which we believe are the 2 key ingredients that we want in Western Australia for hosting million-ounce gold projects. And we also have our Challa East tenement, a little bit better explored. There's a little bit of outcrop, There's a lot of gold that's been identified in some of those outcrops, grades of up to 6 grams per tonne, but very little modern exploration or drilling. So looking forward to coming through and following that up with some drilling in the next few months. Next slide, please. We have our Mount Naira project. This tenement isn't granted yet, but it's a significant tenement package, 165 square kilometres. It's about 400 kilometres of north of Perth, about 300 kilometres north of the Julma deposit. Again, we're looking at a geological environment analogous to that Julma nickel PGE discovery. We believe that we have the right combination of rocks and structure here to host that type of mineralization. Once that tenement is granted, we'll expect to start doing soil programs and geophysics to unlock the value of that tenement. Next slide, please. Our final project that we're working on is our Scania project in New South Wales. As I mentioned earlier, we've got a $16 million investment in this project. We completed a definitive feasibility study in 2018, which demonstrated the very attractive economics at low capital cost of developing this opportunity. Unfortunately, the Scania market is quite small today, so we've been looking at a number of ways to unlock value from that project. And we've got a permitting process underway, and also doing some master alloy production trials so we can try and capture more of that value chain in the future. Next slide, please. And just to compare the value of that Scania project to some other listed companies globally that have scandium or nickel cobalt scandium projects, we have a 23 million market cap. We've got nearly $8 million worth of investments, and some of these companies are carrying significant market capitalizations, and we believe that very little value is being attributed to Platina or its scandium project in its market capitalization. Next slide, please. So just wrapping up, our share price catalysts going forward are completing our Chala and Xanadu drilling programs, getting our Mount Naira project granted, and moving that forward. We're actively looking at opportunities to acquire new projects in Western Australia, and unlocking the value of our non-core assets and realising value from our investments, which we actually hope will do really well going forward. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Cory. Always good to hear from you. Can you talk about your portfolio, and I suppose how you balance the need for funding in some of these projects relative to how do you realise value from your portfolio at the same time?
Yeah, look, it's a good question. At the moment, we've got about $1.8 million worth of cash, so we're sort of well funded in the short term to achieve our objectives. We're very hopeful that Major in particular will have a good share price re-rating once they start to release a lot of their drill results and work towards getting a resource upgrade. So where we can, we'll obviously be looking to try and realise some cash so that we can put that back into the ground and try and create value through exploration success.
You currently have some kind of direct interest in gold and scandium and platinum and silver and zinc. Would you look to kind of JV some of those assets out, or look to divest some of the existing ones?
Look, at this point, our complete focus is on Western Australia, so that's that'll remain our primary strategy going forward. We're always looking at different ways of unlocking value from our scandium project, and and our investments obviously will be just realising them over time.
And in terms of the exploration program in Mount Naira, when's that expected to plan for?
Look, unfortunately, it's taken a very long time to get the tenement granted. We've had a number of administrative errors that have delayed the granting, and then we had to actually cut back the size of the tenement because it encroached onto some state forest. And so, we're expecting that the granting to be imminent, and as soon as we can get on the ground, as soon as it's granted and we can get on the ground, we will.
And just a couple of further questions. There's one here who's a little bit excited. Are you confident of finding a discovery like De Grey mining?
Well, obviously, everybody wants to be able to. Everybody wants to be able to do that. We've really focused on trying to acquire projects on the right structures where there's the right rocks, so that you have the best opportunity of finding a world-class deposit. And I believe that all of our 3 projects in WA have that potential.
And just a question here on this Scandinavian project. Do you have an NPV?
Yes, the NPV back in 2018 was, I think it was 230 million Australian dollars.
Excellent, thank you. And anything you'd like to finish up here in terms of talking to your milestones and probably what excites you the most?
Yeah, look, drilling. I think there's been some great success stories recently in Western Australia. Companies drilling holes, making discoveries, and their share prices doing fantastically well. So that's absolutely my primary focus, is to get our cultural heritage clearance boxes ticked as quickly as possible at both Charla and Xanadu, and get the drill rig on the ground and start drilling.
Great, Cory. That's all we have time for. Always appreciate your time, and we'll follow up with you later in the year.
Thank you very much for your time. Appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone. That's all we have time for. Apologies if my internet was a little bit dodgy. I'm up the coast. See you again next week.